What's up, Shinners? Welcome back to the Shindig podcast, where we get under the skin of the trials community. My name is Tom Hutley.
And I'm Matt Pengelly.
Today,
Trials God.
Yeah.
the God in the biking movement. He brought trials to the forefront. Yes way, it's HANS REY.
Yes, man.
Yeah, we got it. They're like, no way. No, yes way. He's here. Hans, how you doing?
How are you guys doing?
Yes, thank you so
All right,
much.
and you guys?
Yeah. Really excited to have you on. Thank you so much for your time and coming on.
Little bit, fangirling here, and it's very exciting, mate, to get you on.
Likewise.
I think
stoked you guys are doing this podcast. So excited chatting with you guys.
Yeah, just to get your trials mind out of you, because a lot of people may think you're a mountain biker, really, but this is a trials podcast. So one of the very first important questions we're going to ask you: are you a mountain biker or a trials rider?
Well, can't you be both? Can't you be
This we thought this might be an interesting answer.
I mean, first of all, no, I get this question all the time now with the e-bikes. Are you an e-biker or a mountain biker? It's like, can you alpine ski and Nordic ski? You can do it both.
Yeah.
Are you a street trials rider or a competition trials rider? You can do both.
Yeah.
So anyway, so I am, and you know what? The interesting thing is about this question is, trials was a big part of the beginning of mountain biking. In the early days in America, when they had the first mountain bike races, each mountain bike race you had to do a cross country, a downhill, and a trials on the same bike.
Wow!
So a race was 3 races it combined. Only later it separated into specialty, just cross country and just downhill. So trials. We used to have 1,000 competitors in those early mountain bike races, and they all had to do, and it was all on a 26-inch bike. And, it was very basic because the real trials movement was in Europe, and it was at that time still 20-inch bikes. But anyway, so that's, so I'm both.
Okay. Yeah, it is good, because I know that a lot of people calling you an extreme mountain biker. Like, that's a term that's used quite broadly.
Well, that's the term I gave myself to describe, like I was doing the whole trials thing in Europe for over 10 years back in the 80s mainly. And then like in the around 86 or so, I kind of retired and thought I'm going to go to university. And in 87, I had an invitation from an American trials rider saying, hey, you should come to America. There's a new sport. It's called mountain biking. Show those Yanks what real trials riding is.
Yeah.
So I figured that would be a great way to end my career before I go to school. And little did I know my career hadn't really started yet.
Yeah.
And so I went over to America, and then what was the question again? I got sidetracked here.
Extreme mountain biking.
Getting into that term. So
I did that for about 5 years, that whole movement there in America. And then mountain biking exploded in the early 90s, and it was all cool. And I was competing in different disciplines, but I was thinking, I started watching these extreme ski videos with the guys jumping off cliffs. And I always had this vision or dream that I wanted to use my trial skills outside of the competition arena and in real life. And so I started putting my trial skills outside of the competitions into these scenarios, and in the early videos, we started doing videos, me jumping off roofs and doing stuff. And I said, man, I don't want to be a mountain bike racer anymore. I want to become an extreme mountain biker. And some people say that was kind of the beginning of freeride. But that was like 4 or 5 years before the word freeride was even coined. So that's why we used to call it extreme mountain biking.
And obviously that resonated better with most riders, because there was something they already knew, mountain biking, like you said. And then the only element to take it to the next step was say, oh, well, this is just an extreme version of it, I suppose.
Yeah, and the word extreme was really cool back then. And and yes, I think that was part of some of my success, if you want to call it, was the fact that I started doing trials on a regular mountain bike. I switched from the specialty 20-inch bike with a bash guard and all that. And people were in awe of that and they loved it. But when I started doing similar or the same stuff on a regular mountain bike with a big chain ring and then later with suspension and all that, people had even more respect for the skills. And I think it really hit home to them, you know. So, and I think it's to this day like that, you know, like if you watch the young YouTube sensations, whenever they do a video with a full suspension bike, it's often more appreciated than if it's like a hardcore, you know, like street bike or so.
A specific trials bike, which is it's so odd because you already been there and done that, really. Because the first exposure I ever saw of that was Danny McCaskill, because obviously he was trials rider, and then switched over to the inspired style bikes, and of course he's done the downhill sort of stuff, but you know, you've already been there like many decades before and done just that.
It was before that, really.
Yeah, well, you know, everybody gets their inspiration somewhere. I'm sure I got mine somewhere else. And yeah, Danny, it's great, you know, to see where Danny has taken the sport. And I mean, he's the first to tell you that he grew up partly watching my videos, you know. So, and you know, one generation inspires the next, and it's, you know, for a long time, you know, people were always saying like, who's going to be the next Hans Rey? And it really didn't happen until, in my opinion, until Danny came along. I mean, there was plenty of people who started riding better than me or beat me in competitions, but it wasn't like taking it to that next level. And if you compare Danny's career and my career really closely, there's a lot of similarities. And yes, the riding level is, you know, it's on a different level, but like basically what YouTube was for him was VHS for me.
Which is a really interesting point. I wanted to get a little bit into today's conversation, because now trials is brought to us, and I saw you on videos. We also make videos as to kind of fund this podcast. You know, we make videos. Now, what was it really like back then? Because you made quite a few. That was kind of your thing, and how you got. You know, what was it like to make a trials or an extreme biking video? It's nothing like it is now. Do you know what I mean? Can you talk through some of the process of that?
Well, the canvas was blank and you could do whatever you want, and people had never seen anything like it. Plus, I didn't have the competition of like 2,000 other people posting a video the same week on, you know.
Yeah.
I was the only video of the year. And those videos, I mean, to this day, and that's the nice thing about social media, I get all this feedback from people who grew up watching my videos, and so often people say they literally watched it 100 times and they mean it. They don't just like say it as a saying. And they wore tapes out and bought another one, and these tapes were spreading like wildfire, really. And if I had the numbers of impressions that those tapes generated back in those days, considering how hard they were to share, but people would literally have parties watching them, and they would end up on TV eventually, and they would make the rounds all over the world. And I mean, I really, that's one of the numbers I would really like to see, because like it was the only thing around, and it was before the internet, before X Games, before you saw mountain biking on TV. Until then, the only videos was, if there was a big mountain bike race, they would film the cross country and with elevator music, and it was like watching grass grow.
Yeah, no, this is it. It was just what wasn't enjoyable to watch. I think that's when you started to sort of bring a new element to it, and something, this word extreme that we keep using, kind of brought this exciting wow factor to just watching, like rather than just seeing someone roll, because that's not that exciting. But the whole movement and understanding, I think that was like a whole...
Well, trials is a spectator sport, but yes, and I think I was kind of the first to start changing. Until then, mountain biking was about racing, stopwatches, Lycra, training, and I kind of started to explore the fun side of it, and with that, a bit of a lifestyle, and that comes, and the personality kind of fact, you know, like that comes across really well in those early videos, you know. And I was really closely connected to that whole action sport world in Southern California, where so much was going on at the time, from BMX and skateboard and inline skating, and all these other, sports, extreme skiing. I was in the middle of that world, and I got heavily influenced, and that's where I got some of my ideas from, and some of the things, yeah, it was definitely, I was at the right place at the right time, I think, and.
What was probably the biggest? I mean, you've mentioned some words there like influence, and there's a whole plethora of sports that you've just mentioned there. But was there kind of any one big one that kind of gave it the real push for you that made you see bigger than just not mountain biking, sorry, but actually, how to take this
run
to
with
a
it.
more interesting sport, a more enjoyable sport, like you say, the lifestyle freedom movement?
Well, there was a lot of it. And I looked at other sports and I looked at what they did right and wrong. Like BMX, for example, when I grew up in Germany, BMX was huge in America. And I never raced BMX, but I was reading all the BMX magazines. And I couldn't believe, like some of those guys were like my age and they would make 6-figure incomes and drive Porsche and have houses. And for us, it was a pure amateur sport. And it was, so it was like a very different scene early on. And gosh, I forgot the question.
Like, what was the biggest influence? Like, what were?
So sorry.
So you picked up some sports and said, right, that's good about that. I like this about BMX.
Exactly. And I grew up around. I saw some of these BMX legends who maybe retired because sometimes you feel you're so spoiled. You have all the sponsorship and everything, and you want something, and you're missing a few things in life because you can't party with your mates at the weekend. So you're gonna retire. And some of those, they could, even though half a year later they changed their mind, that train had departed. Or I looked at, I remember even somebody like Boris Becker, he was in that was like his heyday. I looked at him, but I think the biggest influence in terms of names was probably those extreme skiers, Glenn Blake, the guy with the mohawk, and Scott Schmidt. They were two of the original extreme skiers. And then like even guys like Robbie Nash, who was a windsurf legend at the time, that was really big, and there was some other, early on I got to do this film with Willy Bogner. He was a big ski filmmaker, fashion guy, but he did an action sports comedy. It's called Fire, Ice and Dynamite. And it had Roger Moore in it. And it had a 17...
What? I've not seen this. We need to go and watch that.
It had a $17 million budget with real actors. It was a big movie, and they had all the extreme sports in there, from kayaking to rock climbing. And we had a biking scene with 13 guys. And I was the stunt coordinator and one of the riders, but I hired guys like Odd P was in it.
Yeah.
And like I hired some downhillers and BMXers, and I hired a guy that did the very first backflip ever. 6 years later. So just to put it into perspective, but that made me rub elbows with a lot of people and also get inspired by a lot of people. Is the internet connection doing okay?
Yeah, it jumped out a little bit there for a second. We've got you back now for a minute. You did say it was someone who did the first backflip on what was that? Sorry.
That was in that film. I hired an Austrian chimney sweep who knew how to do backflips on a hardtail mountain bike, really small flips. But it was like 5 years or 6 years before the free riders started doing backflips on 26-inch wheel bikes, So and we had a guy in there from the circus who would literally ride the cable of the gondola in the Swiss Alps.
Whoa.
Yeah, and there was stunts in that show. It's hilarious. You got to check it out.
I'm definitely going to check that out because it sort of leans towards that idea. You just used the term the circus, which often Martin Ashton made a really good point in his podcast. Is just saying where people can go and watch, and as you said, it's a spectator sport. But if people cannot relate to it or think I'll never do that on the bike, they just think you're a clown in the circus. Because they're just fully, you wouldn't be able to relate to it. You can get it from that. At what point did you see, because now you're saying it was like the first time, when did it become not more, what's the word I'm trying to use, like regular, when people are going, oh, backflips are normal. These sort of tricks are becoming into the mainstream is the word I'm trying to use. At what point did you see that happening?
Well, so then the free riders reintroduced backflips like in the probably 95, 96, Timo Britzel, John Cowan, those kind of guys. And in those days, it was still something special, even when the first guy on a motorcycle started doing them. And then like a few years later, first front flip. And nowadays you can go into every village across the country and there's a kid who can do a backflip, I guarantee you, you know?
Yeah, that is so true.
So it's not that special anymore, but there's, you know, people push the level in other directions, and you know, it's always a yin and a yang, a fine line. Like personally, I'm not the biggest fan of the modern slope style movement. It's too much gymnastics, too much double twist stuff. I rather like the big mountain free ride stuff where it's burly lines with a big bike and where it takes, you know, it's more relatable again. It's the big mountain, you know, so, but it's all good.
No, nice. And going into videos, I think one of the first memorable things that our generation is probably the famous video Tricks and Stunts with Martin Ashton and Martin Hawes, who we've also got Martin Hawes will be on. So we'll have the whole cast soon. We would have
collect the whole deck of everyone.
The whole. I wanted to go into kind of that area and making that particular video because you're virtually an actor in that one, Hans. You're not. I know you're a professional mountain biker, but you know you're playing that. What was he called again?
Dr. No Way.
Dr. No Way.
Dr. Evil or Dr. No Way. Yeah, Dr. No Way. Yeah.
Do you remember that time and how that even came around? Because that was like was that your first collaboration with some British riders, or how did?
No.
I'm going to be corrected.
We're going to be really naive about this because obviously for us, I got into trials through people knowing that bit. So I got into it by people older than me.
And you've been sponsored by GT longer than both of us have been alive. We're 28, 29. So we might not be the most qualified people to be doing this, but we're one of the only...
I don't blame you because I can't even remember and I was there.
Brilliant. Well,
but in the early 80s, I started competing in some trials competitions where they had some English riders, and I actually one of the very first European championship had a round in Rochdale by Manchester. And then later on once I came, that was before I went to America in the early 80s. And then in the late 80s, I used to come quite a bit to the UK and do stuff with the magazines there early on, like with MB UK and with Mountain Biker International. And they had a few races, like indoor races, where they would invite me. And I started doing trial shows at the Alley Palace and Olympia, and
that's where we live right now.
We can literally
see Alexandra Palace from my window. That's where that's strange.
Awesome. Yeah. So there was always an English kind of connection, and then like the mountain biking really boomed in the mid 90s, and then the Martins came onto the scene. I kind of remember meeting the two guys at the Malverns Classic, and I think it was 93. And they just kind of came over for motorcycle trials. I think they had done one bicycle trials event, and they done quite good. And now they were trying to figure out, is there a future with bicycle trials, and what should we do? And I remember they asked me a bunch of questions. And and then eventually they really made careers for themselves, and they started traveling the world. They had like big sponsorships, like Martin was riding for Cannondale, and he started doing more and more of the American events. And at the time when they did Tricks and Stunts, I was supposed to just have a cameo appearance. And I had already done my own video series, my 4 videos, you know, with Level Vibes and HANS No Way REY and Monkey See, Monkey Do. And they came to film this sequence, and then the week after, so they were supposed to film all the how-tos. And it turned out that they weren't that good explaining those techniques in front of the camera. So they had me fill in a little bit. And that's why I ended up having, I don't think I was supposed to be so much on camera, but yeah, that was a funny scene. I had this little bunny rabbit in my backyard, and then we made it look like the cat from Dr. Evil, you know, in the James Bond films. And I was the Dr. No Way and was patting my cat. And they did this brilliant opening scene, and I had nothing to do with that other than that little cameo. And that opening scene was, I think, one of the best trials edits ever. with that 70s chase scene and
Yeah,
the music and the
we watched it
costume.
this morning just to give a little, get into the mode of it,
into the zone of it.
and also just to remind me how funny Martin and Martin look on that one. So it was very funny. But I think really that resonates strongly with the trials community, and that's the kind of thing where that's the first time I saw you in a video. So
well, that was like the sort of DVD that was handed down to me. Like, it's like, we've watched this. This is kind of like, you've now got to go with it. So it's, and that was kind of, well, it was still obviously VHS, wasn't it? So it was still at that point when people would put it on. That's all they had to put on. So you would watch it over and over and over again. And I think that's what drove the popularity of them.
And in slow motion, and
watched it back. What was that? Yeah, like put it at half speed. Yeah.
But making all these videos, I don't know how many. You've probably made hundreds. Is there one that sort of really resonates with you that was very impacting or changed, life changing, or just a great experience? Which sort of video had the most impact? Oh, you have to think about.
Yeah, that's good. I don't know. I know for a certain generation of especially English guys, the tricks and stunts was a big deal. For me personally, a big one was, the first one, HANS REY was the first one, and it was the only one. And that was, literally the late owner of GT, Richard Long, one day he came to me and said, Hans, it's so difficult to explain to people what you can do on a bike. Why don't we do one of those videos?
Yeah, it's so funny to say, because now that's like a standard thing. You just do that. But he's obviously saying, "Oh, why don't we make a VHS that you could give out to people?" And
those nowadays you can do a better production with an iPhone than we could do with the best cameraman in the world. Then and it's amazing how all this has grown. But so that's how it kind of all got going. And who would have thought, that? But like Level Vibes is a film. I sometimes, whenever I get to watch it again, it's like I go like, the level of writing is a lot higher these days. But when it comes to the whole video and the stuff, you go like, what, it wouldn't fare that badly in today's world, in terms of the originality and the humor and the writing locations and even the writing, because I tried to pick these locations in Level Vibes. I went to Jamaica and there was this cascading waterfall, not a vertical waterfall, but cascading. It's called the Dun River Falls. And I rode my bike up and down those falls and people couldn't believe it, because like it's a famous spot where honeymooners go and they slip and slide and can barely walk it. And putting the bike into these kind of situations made the appreciation from the viewers grow. No, I lost you guys.
Yeah, that's right. We were just.
I think our video froze.
We're back now. We're back.
Yeah.
Yeah, to really put in perspective, like you say, it's a waterfall that people can't even stand up on, and you're just there on a bike, and it just makes all sense.
It's just blowing people's minds every day. Then, Hans, like being first on this, first on that. Is there a particular first move that you claim to be sort of yours? I was definitely the first person to do that move. Is there anything like that resonates?
Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm sure there is a bunch. I can't really. I didn't get the credit for it, but I feel like I was one of the first to do the side hop up stuff. On really small stuff. There was another guy, Hans Kempter, and I remember him and me doing it a bit. And then there was always, I can't really claim it. There was other guys trying to play around with it, but the first side hops were really little, But people always call the Statue of Liberty when you stand on your rear tire with your front tire and hopping on your rear tire and with your hand up in the air, and that was kind of that was
the Statue of Liberty. You spin the front wheel and
I think that's more like my signature trick. I might have come up with that name. I called it that because it reminded me of Statue of Liberty, but I must have seen some BMX freestyle kid doing that trick, and we kind of adopted it to our trials bikes, and then it became part in our shows, and over here it became then kind of my signature move.
Well, I think that one definitely resonates. That's a good point. It's a what I mean by that is, you're a showmanship rider, and that's very kind of theatrical. Like, hey, not only you're a professional rider, you probably got an IMDb page, I bet.
Yeah, quite
He's
an
an official
one.
actor, you know, of all of the acting and stuff that you've done. So let's give him I think you deserve that one, Hans. Officially, that is your move. And I'll also go with the fact that, yeah, you were the side-up king, because it's probably one of the only moves I can do. So, but yeah, and it really changed, I think, some of the movement in trials, just that particular motion.
Well, we spoke about it at the beginning, but you know how you said you started on like a 20-inch, like a smaller trials bike, but before progressing to mountain biking, and that was, well, not mountain biking, but that sort of style of bike where people could understand it more, and it was much more impressive. And of course, other people have done that. With that in mind, what do you think of kind of the way trials bikes are now? You know, seatless, and is it too much? Is it too wrong? Should it be more of a bike that people should understand? How should the sport move forward?
Yeah, it's a difficult question. I mean, sports change and evolve. And if you really look in the history of trials, even motorcycle trials, which goes back over 100 years, the rules have changed a lot over the years, the counting system and the way it's scored. So, you know, like I just went for the first time to a big trials competition in the USA like 2 weeks ago. Kenny Belay put on the...
Kenny, he's actually coming on next week. Yeah, he'll be with us too. Yeah, he's a good friend of ours. So
yeah, he's a great ambassador for the sport. And it's great that he kind of brings trials back in America, because it was really part of that when mountain biking exploded in the late 80s, early 90s, and then it kind of went away. And it's cool, you know, Kenny wanted to bring all those top Euro riders over, but they couldn't come this year because of COVID. Yeah. But I'm sure that event in the US will grow. And so it was really cool to see that kind of come about. But that was the first time I saw a hardcore modern day trials competition. And when the weekend started, I had no idea about the rules. I didn't know those new rules where you gain
positive scoring. Were they?
Yeah,
that's what I was going to ask. Is that what they were using there?
Yeah.
So Kenny took it with him. Okay, I know it was the first time. I believe the Nationals this year in the UK, that was the first time they used positive scoring system as well. So, I mean, do you have a better understanding of that? What are your thoughts? Excuse me.
No,
what are your thoughts?
I get it now, and I first I didn't like it. I still not 100% sure. I mean, some of the changes are actually good, and it's just too confusing for the spectators to watch.
Yes. And
I actually ended up being the narrator or the commentator, and to really explain what was going on and the strategies. And even they had like 4 different classes. So there were all these gates, and people didn't understand what, you know, like he writes this, and it almost should have a ribbon again, a section that makes it very easy for the spectator to understand. He has to go from A to B, you know, but all these gates.
Almost like flagpoles, I imagine, because they're only like little stickers on the rock, and unless you're the rider, you can't really see that. Let's say from the spectator's point of view.
Yeah.
Yes, that also, you know. So there's all these, you know, there's room for improvement, but overall, I thought it was pretty cool, and it was really exciting to see the sport and the same enthusiasm riders have. And it's this, I still felt that original trial spirit in this generation. I mean, us trials riders is a certain breed of persons anyway, and you can always tell them out of a crowd.
Yeah.
And it was neat to see the scene, and it was, and the level of riding was quite good. But yeah, the sport has evolved, and we've done so many changes in our, not just the rules, but even the riding style. In the old days, we didn't even know how to hop. It was all pedaling a section, and you could barely stop and track stand and concentrate before something. So you had to kind of study the section and before you entered it. So you remember, okay, when I get to that rock, I stay left, and then I go, then I gain speed to make it up the little step and
to keep the momentum going.
And nowadays you can just like track stand and try it and go back, and then like all of a sudden later, then the hopping started, and that was a big thing. The first time I saw somebody doing a 90-degree swing the back wheel around 90-degree, we were all like, holy cow, did you see that? You know, and then all of a sudden us German guys and the Central European guys, we were all about riding and had gears, and the Spanish guys, they were all about hopping. They couldn't even pedal the smallest little piece, they would just hop. They had really short cranks on their bikes, and they would just hop, 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 hop. And it was like, And I mean, that's
But that's why I'm thinking different riders like Op-P and from different countries. Op-P, you got Martin Ashton, all of you from all these different countries. There was one element that you did slightly different, which I find in trials. You're like, oh, you were doing back hops. You know, Hans, you could say you're doing 90 turns, and then mine could be just rolling through things. When you all got together, sort of like how you created all the tricks and the moves together, because you watched each other and rode with each other. Is that kind of how you guys sort of? I'm trying to say, you took on the sport and pioneered it and go, wow,
yeah,
this is
you
what
live and learn.
Yeah.
And I mean, we had no idea what to expect when we went to the first European Cup, and that there was in 82. There was 3 rounds, one in Spain, one in Germany, one in England, all within 3 weeks. And when we went to Spain, there was one guy who's ridden once a competition in Spain, but other than that, we had no idea what to expect. There was one rider who was sponsored by Montesa at the time, Andrea Codina, and he was the first king of trials and was my hero. And he used to do demonstrations for Montesa and trial stuff. And a few of his films, wasn't even videos, it was before probably videos. So somebody had a film, and we would like analyze the few pictures we've seen and all this, and we had no idea. But it's a little bit like this to this day. Like you guys, wherever you live in London, there might be another group in the next neighborhood over, and you guys started riding together, and those guys maybe had more of a BMX background. The next thing you learn from each other and you push, and that's how it was with us, but with nations.
Yeah, yeah, because it was so obviously so niche.
You still do get a level of that, I suppose. You have like groups of people that prefer a particular move, or they'll call it a certain name. I mean, even like the move, like the Frenchie, for instance. Of course, Frenchie.
Yeah, just we call it a Frenchie because I guess we should watch French people do it.
Where you switch, for people who don't know, that's where you switch to front, but you literally don't pull the front brake. You just bang the front wheel in midair and switch the
even
rear.
different parts of the country in England. If you were in the south, it was literally called just a wheel swap. But if you were in the north, it was called a pigeon or something. I can't remember what that. But yeah, that great sort of terminology.
It was called the Kuriyama. There was this kid, Kenichi Kuriyama, who became a really famous motorcycle trials rider, but his dad was already a famous motorcycle trials rider, and he wanted to have 3 kids. So he married a tall woman, so his kids would be tall. He made 3 boys. 2 of them grew up riding bicycle trials. The one was not allowed to ride the bicycle in case it was the wrong preparation for motorcycle trials. And when those kids were riding bicycle trials, they were on a level, on a different world. And this kid was 8 years old, a little Japanese kid, and he would ride up a 1 meter step. And he is so little, his body mass, and 8 years old, he would literally start a wheelie like 8 feet away and stand up the wheelie and bang his front wheel into the wall and use that momentum to make it up to his skid blade. And
a tap was born, potentially.
Yeah.
Right. Wow.
And you call it what? A Kuriyama, sorry.
Yeah, the guy was Kenichi Kuriyama. He's still an active professional trials rider.
Wow.
We have to go and check that out, which now they just, obviously, that seems to have turned into a much shorter word, which was tap. That's what that move sounds like now, a wall tap or anything along those lines. Yeah, no, absolutely incredible. Off air, whilst I remember this on my off air, just before we started, you made a really good point, and you said, "Oh, did you know that the first ever trials competition was in the UK
in 1940?"
I had to stop you because I was like, "Save it for the recording." I'm going to jump straight into that one. Was it? You said the 40s? Can you tell us a little bit about that, Ray?
Yeah, that's something that came about just recently, and until then, it was always a little bit of battle between the Germans and the Spanish who started it. But there was really a guy in Germany who organized, until then at least, the first pure bicycle trials event in 1974 in Germany.
Yeah.
And then it kind of swapped over to Spain. And the Spanish guys, especially Odd-P's parents, they made it big. And they made it, but the Germans were the first. But this guy, Gernot Menke, he's the German guy. he did some research because he always thought, man, there was such a motorcycle trial scene in England. And he went to I think it's called the British Library or so in London somewhere, or the archives. Yeah. And he went through all newspaper articles from the last like 100 years. Wow. And there was these famous scramble races, motorcycle races in England always with these, motorcycle trials started here. And sometimes they had literally a bicycle class. And after the Second World War, there was a shortage of petrol in the country. And all those guys who would do the scrambling events, and I think it was somewhere that they used to do just bicycle events, and they literally had there's a newspaper article talking about it, and 12 guys standing in a row, and there's a website where this German guy wrote now recorded the history, but literally history rewritten. There had been a trials event 35 years before we ever knew about it. So
wow. Making breakthroughs right now. So I think we can officially say that potentially trials may have had its first taste in the UK in the mid-40s. That's rather incredible sort of new news.
Yeah, that's for sure, actually. Yes, because motorcycle trials started here, and God knows they might have had a bicycle class even in before the war, in some of those events, and they, so
I would like to think now I'm picturing some soldiers, like extreme mountain bike soldiers, are like, okay, we run out of petrol. This is what you need to learn. We've got to do it on a push bike, jumping off buildings.
Look, everything we know or see seems like it has been happening before, not just in trials, but in trials, for example, when I was a young kid, like in the mid 80s, there was a French motorcycle trials guy who rode up the Eiffel Tower. And we thought that was so cool, and of course later a lot of bicycle trials guys hopped their way up it. But I saw a picture a few months ago from a guy in 1903 who rode his bicycle down the stairs of the Eiffel Tower,
It's history's always been repeated. It's like when the famous like cycle ride we have in the UK is the Land's End to the John O'Groats. It's like nearly 1,000 miles. And people do it like in 10 days and stuff on their road bikes today. Yeah. But there was people doing it on penny farthings and stuff in like, and they were doing it like 3 days on a penny farthing. You're like, bore off with your road cycling. It's been done before. Like, we're just.
And I've got to say that having, a cycling career, you mentioned earlier, being like, this will be the end of my career, was actually the beginning. It's not an easy thing to maintain. You're one of the longest sponsored.
Can I ask, how old was you at that point, Hans?
Yes. How old were you
thought you're done with biking, you're going to go to university and study or whatever? How old was you when it started for you?
Well, 18 when I retired from trials competition in Europe and said I'm going to university. And then a few months later, I realized, you know what? I can at least still do some trials shows on the side. That's how we earned some pocket money. Nobody was really sponsored. I mean, as being one of the best riders in Germany or in Europe, I would get a free bike from the sponsors. But we already then had a trials show team, and we would make some pocket money doing that. And I figured I could continue that. And then I got addition from that American trials rider, Kevin Norton. He used to come to Europe to compete in our European or in the World Championships. And he was sponsored by BMX companies, and he looked all fancy and he made a salary. No, none of us. And he was not even in the top 30, and he was all American, but he really wanted to get trials going in America. And he told me, come and show them what real trials is. And, the next thing you know, I took a semester of the university, went over there, and I was thrown right into it. I couldn't have dreamt of it. Like I got to meet all those BMX heroes literally in the first 2 weeks, and was part of a big BMX film production that happened to have every rider that at the time was in it. I got sponsored by Swatch. I started doing shows with the likes of Rodney Mullen and Rob Roscoe and those skateboard legends. And I used to be thrown in with the Laguna Rats, which is this underground mountain biking club that were really into trials or extreme biking. To me, they are the original free riders, and they made me a real mountain biker. And then I got hooked up with GT right then and there. And through them, I was like with their BMX and freestyle team on the road and do shows. And the next thing I know, like, well, I may stay another semester in America to see how it goes. And
Here you are.
there was a lot of pressure. It wasn't, I didn't still think this would be a career, you know. Nobody had ever heard of it making a career in this, you know. Like my parents were like, get your ass back to university, you know. What are you going to do in 2 or 3 years when this is all over? And it was a lot of pressure, and it wasn't really, I mean, it was an awesome lifestyle for a 20-year-old kid, you know, in America and all this, but I wasn't necessarily making tons of money. And it was before mountain biking really exploded. So it took another 3 years, you know, for it to really blow up, you know. So, and even then it was still like, shouldn't I go back? Because if I don't go back now after 3 years here, I'm never going to go back. And then what I'm going to do, I always anticipated this would only last another year and then it would be over. But, you know, I've been saying this now for 35 years. So I kind of.
Well, that's what I mean. Obviously, when you're younger, it's quite fresh. You feel like, oh, I can do this for a while. You don't imagine, I don't know, I might be wrong, but you probably didn't imagine you'd still be doing it now. What does a professional at your, with all this experience, all this knowledge, and like you've been doing it for so long, what does it look like now as your career? Because, you know, obviously I'm not sure you're doing all the same tricks, or are you? You know, is your body allowing you to? What does that look like kind of now?
Yeah, well, it's first of all, that the whole trial thing is a business, you know, and it was always really hard as a trials rider to make a living and to turn it into a business and to make the sponsors also see a value in it. Because even in the early days of mountain biking, I was part of these mountain bike teams, but the team managers only cared about the cross country and the downhill. They didn't give, you know, like we were the little sideshow, and we had to fight for ourselves. We had to find ways to make money, but eventually, you know, and I think I did pave the road for many other guys to have a career, and later it was easier for other riders to come to America and say to any bike brand, hey, I can do what Hans does for GT.
Yeah, that's literally, use you as an example.
And that's fine, but I started doing these shows where we bring the sport to the crowds and not into some remote forest where no spectators were, or we started getting the sponsors on TV because we were much more interesting to film for the TV station. So we started to, you know, just make it. I thought it would last, or would, you know, like when I was 30, then 10 years later, everybody was like, well, you should start thinking about retiring, you know, like, because everybody used to retire around 30 for especially if you were a racer. And I was like, yeah, but why should I retire? You know, I'm having fun, and you had to kind of reinvent yourself. And then the value was obviously not in necessarily winning trials competitions. You know, it was good at the beginning because those competitions were big and everybody in America would watch them. They were at the mountain bike race right in the center, and the spectators loved them. But I started then getting a value with getting media coverage, you know, being in the magazines, being on TV, being, you know, and then inspiring this whole new lifestyle and this new breed of mountain biker that was not necessarily interested in racing, you know, and who wanted to have fun and just ride and jump off stuff. And this game has been changing a lot over the years, and I have to adjust. And just recently, I mean, our sport, or the sponsorship game, has changed a lot in the last 2 years since COVID.
Oh, really?
And it's been really hard. And the social media is so important, and the sponsors often don't really know how to put a value on anybody.
I don't think they even know what's going. My close friend Tom, he's actually he's been with GT for years, and they had to drop him. You know, they've you know, smalling their team, but it obviously shows that there are value to, like yourself. Probably, I think you're one of the longest sponsored mountain bikers in the world. Someone might correct me on that, but I think, or at least the longest served for GT ever.
Yeah, I think I have the record of being with the same brand for the longest time. Tinker Juarez is probably the longest pro because he was in the 80s at BMX Pro, riding even the Upland Pipeline, the famous Pipeline skate park and all that. But then he was a BMX racer, and then he was a mountain bike racer before I became into the scene. And he has been with Cannondale for a long time, but not as long as I have been with GT, and I think he's still active, like does some endurance races these days.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's definitely the only person I've heard of who has a longer career with one single sponsor is a skateboarder, Steve Caballero. He's been with Paulo Peralta for 40 years.
Steve Caballero, I was just thinking that's an old name even from skating. Yeah. And you actually met you mentioned earlier, you met Rodney Mullen as well. I mean, that's a name that rings true, a true pioneer of that. But he's still skating, actually. I've seen that. How often are you still riding, Hans? Are you still on the bike regularly?
I am. I'm riding about real trials once a week.
And okay, you're still riding trials there. That's good. Yeah.
I think that's nearly more than us most of the time.
It's about we're once a week. We'll be riding after this.
We have a saying: Sundays at 11. We broke that rule today, but we thought, you were worth it. You were worth it.
It's the first time we've ever recorded on a Sunday and not ridden our bikes.
But everyone else in the UK, we say, look, we'll see you there Sunday at 11, and that's kind of code for let's go trials riding. So there'll be other trials riders Sundays at 11. So.
No, I have several bikes. I have a 26-inch bike, kind of with a modern geometry, with no seat and with the long stem. Ooh. And then I have an old school, more like a hardtail mountain bike, with a suspension fork, like a street kind of trials bike, which I also ride. And some of the tricks are much easier on that bike and vice versa. And then I've been really kind of riding e-bikes a lot. And I ride on the e-bike. I like not hopping around. I hate it. Hopping around on an e-bike, it doesn't make sense. But old school trials pedaling, really technical, feels like the old school motorcycle stuff where you climb up steps and stairs and technical terrain, and I love that. And I think there's really room for a little sub trials category for that kind of riding.
This is
we want to segueing
really nice. This is segueing very nicely.
This is exactly what Martin Ashton said when he came on.
Yeah,
the fact
and
that
we actually saw Martin Hawes on Sunday as well. He was at the competition. So again, getting in, and which his son won the round, might I add, in case you didn't know.
In his class,
Harry's doing very well. His little son taking after his father there.
But we'd like to see what your thoughts are on the whole e-bike.
The future of trials, is there e-bikes involved with trials? Because there is with, mountain biking. Where do you think this is going to go?
I think we're going to have more and more subcategories, before it was one thing and, like everything, and then it forks out into different subcultures. And I think it's going to be like this with trials. You're going to have the hardcore competition guys, which we already had for a long time.
Yeah.
And then we have more like the guys who are influenced by Danny and Fabio and the street guys. But then there could be a whole like retro bike segment and I think the e-bike, I have an event format, because right now I think e-bike races are the dumbest thing I know. Racing across country on an e-bike where you have to out-pedal the motor. I mean, e-bikes are supposed to be easier and fun, and to out-pedal your motor. I mean, even guys like Julian Absalon, who is like the cross-country Olympic champion, said the hardest race he's ever done in his life was an e-bike race because you have to out-pedal the motor. So, but I have a concept for an event called Skills that is kind of has some trials roots in it, and I just need to one of the days and invite everybody from this two-wheeled world, not just trials guys, but also the free riders and the enduro guys and the downhillers and even the motorcycle trials guys, and bring them all together on e-bikes. And
can you just sorry, Hans, can you just repeat the very beginning of that concept? We just lost a bit of connection there. You said it's called Skills.
It's called Skills, and it's a bit like trials riding.
Yep.
Old school trials riding where you have these courses, and it's kind of like the same. As further you get, the scoring is really simplified. So you if you make it to the end of the section, you earn 10 points.
Yep.
And if you there's a 2-point marker, a 5-point marker, and a 10. And however far you make it before you have the first mistake, that's the points you get in that section.
Yep.
So it's kind of like you can, and sometimes there's like alternative like routes, or you can multiple choice where you can take less risk, for example, but get the full points. Yep. And anyway, I have a little video out on it, and I just need to do a test event one of these days, and then invite all my mates with all the different backgrounds and see How
So it
pans
sounds
out.
like you've got your pen on paper. You're working towards something already.
Yeah, I actually had this idea for a couple of years, and I haven't managed to realize it yet with the COVID thing and finding
This
the
could
right
be an
location.
exclusive for everyone then. Some new
I wanted to
competition
make it a really
platforms.
big event,
Yeah.
but part of me thinks about maybe putting on just a little test event with like 10 guys or so and having fun and taking it down that route. So we'll see.
Well, I think it's really accessible, and I think that's what e-bikes should be. It shouldn't be like, let's go as extreme as possible. Like, the reason why people buy them, whether it's a mountain bike or a road bike e-bike, is because it's confidence of getting out and thinking, right, well, if there's a hill there, can I get home?
I mean, that concept is obviously trials came from motorbikes, right? So for these where it was like engine and there was assistance in the bike is what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So with an e-bike, to really use it to advantage, no, don't use it to cross the country. Use it to get up that seriously steep hill you never would have pedaled up before an e-bike.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah, no, exactly. No, you're right. And every place has its, has its purpose. And like you say, the bicycle trials start from motorcycle trials, but then the bicycle trials guys brought the hopping to the motorcycle trials. Those were all bicycle guys. I remember.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember really being there when some of my trials biking mates, especially the Spanish guys who would hop, and we met Eddie Lejeune, who was at the time the motorcycle trials world champion. And they said, let me use your motorcycle. And they showed him how to hop around on a motorcycle. And that guy was a 3-time world champion. And later, and then like all the motorcycle guys would laugh. And those guys was TRS, was later the same time motorcycle trials world champion, coming from bicycles, changing he brought in all that hopping stuff. And at the beginning, all these old school motorcycle guys would laugh at him and I get lost. And nowadays, I mean, look at Tony Bow and what they do, and not that I say it's necessarily the best way. Sometimes they taken it to such an extreme level then that the general public cannot comprehend anymore. I think that's the problem, even in the bicycle trial scene. Some of these guys, they are so good. Not only do they make it look easy or too easy, but they make it also look so gnarly. And it's often like, yes, I love to watch it, but I don't want to try that shit. No thanks.
Yeah.
Almost a different sport when you get to these different heights and you think, wow, you're just in a completely separate league. I mean, the one thing we love and we're patriotic about trials is, to us, with bias, 2 of the best trials riders in the world are from our country. We say that now. In the competition world, then if you know Jack Carthy and Charlie Rolls, very good sort of trials riders. And that we don't get enough of that kind of recognition. But obviously you're in the States. It's a huge country. Do you think that's what plays a part into it being so spread out in the USA, like trials itself? Because I feel like maybe England have got a big presence, or we have like an online presence or so on. It's just the scene isn't as geared towards trial specific, is what I'm trying to say, in the US. Why do you think that?
Well, even in the US, trials is even way smaller in the US than you think.
Yeah.
But first of all, there comes this thinking and that everything in the USA is better, which is really not the case. Some things are, and some things are cooler, but and they just make things or package it differently, and it appeals. But that's like, there was a lot of great trials riders over the last 4 decades, and the one thing they always struggled is we getting recognition in America. And maybe I got just lucky. I was there at the right time.
Yeah.
And it feels like this is changing now again, and even like guys like Kenny, he has to come to America to show Americans how to put on a proper trials competition, and he's bringing it back and making it cool. And so not everybody that comes from America is necessarily better. It seems like this, and it's cool to have a global respect from, like I was known in America really before I was properly known in Europe,
Yeah.
So that definitely helped me, especially with an American sport. But it's a package deal, like for example, someone like Brumotti, he's been trying for years to come to America to get like accepted by the mountain biking world, which never really quite happened because he was this eccentric trials guys, and then he switched to road bikes, and now who knows where to place him? Is he a trials guy? Is he a road bike guy? Is he a mountain biker? He's really none of the above. You know what I mean? He's more like a personality that uses a bike. So anyway, it's weird to analyze it all and to really say what the right way is. But it's I think that's what a lot of these European athletes strive for, or is to get that global recognition. And it's easy to do it in your own country and in your own field, but then to reach out of that, and there needs to be some of the right steps and moves done, and it takes a lot of polishing your image and doing stuff and building your foundation. I think that's my advantage, is that I built myself a really big foundation, you know. And
I think, like you said with the example with Bramati there, where you can't just necessarily go to America and expect it just to work. You need to, like say, have an established footing as to who you are. You can't just be like, hi, I'm this guy, and then but back record, are you a road biker, are you a mountain biker? And yeah, you need to get a good solid stable footing there for that. Before we move on, Hans, off air before we came on, and this kind of ties in what you were saying about some of the Spanish riders who introduced like the hopping to trials. You showed us a beautiful looking book about his Montesa, isn't it? Can you show that for the listeners?
Yeah, I don't know if you
hold
can
up nice
see
and
that.
close to the camera, or there we go. Yeah, when it's there, you go.
It's
We can see
called-
it now.
It's called Montesita, and Montesita was the first kind of production trials bike, if you want to say so.
Mm-hmm.
And at the time, there was Montesa, which was the motorcycle trials company from Spain. And Pedro P, which is Ott P's father, he was the director of development there, or R&D, for 25 years. And he started developing a bicycle. First of all, Montesa was going through some rough times, and then he had a young kid, and he actually, you know, he saw some photos of, I think, kids doing it in Germany and other places. And so he started building this bike. And a few years later, he broke away from Montesa altogether, because they had really financial problems. And he took over the bicycle part and started a new company called Monty. And that's when Monty got started. And Ott P's father was behind it. And at the time, Ott P was still a very young kid. He was probably
That
only...
sounds crazy, because to me, he's like a, you know, Ott P's.
No, Ott was at that time only probably 12 or so years old.
Wow, yeah.
And he was, he was even too young to compete against me directly. He was with the younger kids. Only later, in like 86 or so, we started riding in the same class. But that book is a beautiful piece of work that this guy from Spain did, and Enric Gilbert. And there's a Legend bike trial website, or Bici trial Instagram account, where I can send you guys the link.
Yeah,
Well,
definitely.
we'd love to share
we
that,
love
because
that kind of stuff. We'll be sharing that for sure.
Because some of our audience are very much, you know, you got some people who have like the Martin Ashton era. There's people who were, you know, a little bit after that, and they love kind of like the retro bike trial, or even understanding, you know, where it all came from.
Aha, there it is.
Trial scene, yeah.
That's like Codina. He was the first star of the sport. But the book is beautiful. It has all the history of the sport. It shows all these riders, all these kids I used to compete with. It was really brought me back memory lane to, and then see all the bikes and those early prototypes. And there's a big scene in Spain still. And it's cool to record all that stuff.
Well,
and
speaking of memory lane, Matt took a photo when he went to Birmingham.
I was in Birmingham 2 weeks ago.
Do you want to pop this up on the screen?
I'll get this on the screen now. I'm going to show you
see?
something that I stumbled across in the street. I couldn't believe it, because on that day, you wrote back to me and said, hey, Matt, I'd love to come on the podcast. 5 minutes later, I walked into the street and I saw this bicycle. Can you see that, Hans?
Yeah.
Absolutely crazy. Now, I did also share it in another group, and it sort of blew up on Facebook a little bit. Everyone seeming to think that was one of your horrible story that you had home broken into. You had a lot of bikes stolen, didn't you?
Yeah.
Way back in time. A lot of people saying that's where it must have come from there. I bet it's stolen now. Now I sort of wish I'd went back there and took the number somehow. Or, but can you tell us what you can see here right now, Hans? And this bike, was it, you know, it's a custom frame. What's going on?
Yeah, that was a custom signature model GT made, and I don't know how many of them, 100, 200, 300 bikes maybe at the time.
Sorry, only that many. So should I have stayed behind and told this guy I need to buy this bike off you? Because it's
no, it's not mine. Somebody sent me that picture, and that bike didn't get stolen. I have one of those, which I literally rode yesterday. I was practicing for. I'm gonna have another cameo in another Trials Legends video coming up. That's all I can say right now.
Okay.
Wow.
Okay.
Epic.
So
I had to shake some of the rust off my bones, and you asked me earlier. It doesn't get easier with age. For a long time, I could keep my ride. I think until I was 50, I could do the same stuff pretty much than I used to do always.
Wow.
But I can say that anymore. I think I look at some rocks and I go like, I'm not gonna make it up that one anymore. I used to, but that's just But you have to keep working on it and pushing it. And but back to that bike, that was a HANS REY signature model. It was kind of meant to be a street trials bike with old schools, and people could set it up for hardcore competition, like with a rigid fork, or people could do it like I would do it with like a 80 mil suspension fork.
Yep.
Yeah.
And
what year would that have been? Do you know?
I don't know. It's probably 15 years ago or so, maybe more. Maybe I need to look at some old pictures. It could be.
But it was sort of early 2000s then, or was it the end of that?
Probably 2004-ish, I would think.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, we were just so surprised.
10 years before I'd even started riding trials. That's how mine it could have been. And as well as keeping your career as a rider, one of our ambassadors, Chris, actually, he met you a few years ago. You were in, is it Essex? Chelmsford, doing some sort of most motivational speaking as well, sort of tour, rather than just a show on your bike.
Yeah, I stopped competing long time ago, and then eventually I stopped doing trial shows. I think the internet is broken again, right?
Yeah, you're back now though. Yeah, carry on. Yeah, you're good.
So I stopped competing long time ago, literally in the late 90s, and since then I've hardly done any competition. And then I stopped eventually doing trial shows. I actually just remember, like, when I was in Bentonville at Kenny's Festival, that the last time I did a trial show was there in 2016. Together with Danny McCaskill and Ryan Leach, the three of us did a show together.
Wow.
And
that sounds cool. Yeah.
That was my last real trial show. But
well, it's still been able to, what we're saying is you're still going up in front of people, telling them about your career. It doesn't necessarily have to be flashy.
Exactly.
Yeah,
well,
flashy.
and still serving people and,
Yes.
providing value to people still. I think.
Well, that's the point, and that's what I think. That's what some of the trials riders who try to make a career sometimes don't understand. It's not always about bunny hopping an inch higher than the last guy. It's more like there's guys who can maybe bunny hop a foot less than some of the good guys, but they bring value to the sponsors, and and you can do that in many ways. And one way is winning competitions. That's the easiest way. But that only matters if anybody watches those competitions. Otherwise, it doesn't matter.
And that's probably the most stressful of the equation as well, because there's so much pressure on you to do that. So
competition, only one guy can be on top of the podium, So that's why guys like Danny or Fabio, they found other ways to bring value, and the sponsors all of a sudden love it, because it's like they do all the work for the marketing, and there's actually a number attached to it. And the sponsors often, I hate to, and that's what pisses me off about social media. There's so much fake stuff too. People used to buy followers and impressions and views, and the sponsors wouldn't even care, because it made them look good if that guy has more, it was like stupid game, So, but so all that, and
well, it sort of that element leaves it for anyone. If anyone wants to try and become a YouTube sensation like that, it's out there. Like anyone could potentially do it, because even Danny's video was already, I'm sure that video that made him go viral was out for months before it went viral, because you are actually
one of the big
person
instigators
of Danny. I don't know if anyone else knows that, but when Danny first 2009, you shared that video, and I think it's probably because of you. Danny might have a career.
I'm surprised you know that story, because that video would have gone big with or without me. But
I think you had that validation. Sorry.
I got an email from a guy in Germany, and he sent this email to me and to Tarek Rassouli, who's now the manager of Danny. And I reposted it right away and said, wow, this is next level or something. And that was even before Lance Armstrong picked it up after, and other people.
Yeah.
But I think when I picked it up, it had around 20,000 views. So, but like I say, it might have been out a few days already, and then all of a sudden it caught on momentum.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was like next level on so many things. And then the excellent music, and then combining BMX and trials, and it was like
that was that other different element, because you and say the Martins were like, it was that real nice crossover. You could see it was trials, mountain bike, sort of extreme, and then everyone was sort of watching Danny go, wait, is that a BMX? Is that and that was that sort of new exciting element that he brought to it, I think.
Yeah, and not the static hopping. It was like all fluent and more fun to watch, and
so there's that as well. And you've got the bit on there as well, Matt, about the sort of the philanthropy as well that you've done over the years. There's been a lot. Could you share a little bit of that as well? Because again, I didn't know this until this morning, and I'm sure many of our listeners don't as well. But again, it's another value that you then add to the sport and biking in general.
Well, I always was involved, and I think we all need to give back, especially if you're in some sort of power, be it you guys with your podcast, or be it a current world champion, or be it somebody who is lucky enough to make a living of the sport. We all should give back, and that can be in many forms. And I've always supported good causes, and eventually I started my own non-profit charity. It's called Wheels for Life. And we give bikes to people in developing countries who need transportation. So it's not, I don't want to...
More than 10,000 since 2017, I read. So
yeah, 15,000 since 2005.
Wow.
15,000 since 2005.
Oh, wow.
And it's really me and my wife who do it all. This is not we don't pay ourselves. It's all volunteer. As a matter of fact, I even pay my own travel expenses when I go there. But, it's often kids have to walk to school for 20K. They don't have a bus. They don't have public transportation.
Oh, it's massive. I mean, I read it's a book called a gentleman called Hans Roslin. It's basically saying about different levels of inequality. It makes a massive, massive difference to their life. Like it's like the lowest line, and by adding a bike is like it brings them up a rung in terms of like poverty levels. Yeah. Just for that one. So I just think that is so empowering. What that then
and
does.
That's because the bike opens the door to education, to healthcare, and all stuff that these people might not have if they live in a remote village. All of a sudden, they can put 100 kilos of mangoes on the back of the bike and roll it or ride it to the next market, which might be 10 miles away, and sell those mangoes. And even though they might only earn $1, but $1 is better than nothing. And without that, they, so.
I think that's incredible. Yeah, a really nice and encouraging thing. If there's anyone wants to go and check that out, anyone that wants to get involved with HANS, go and check out. They've got a website, New Wheels for Life, it was called, on the charity, and see if you guys can help HANS out there, maybe get involved.
Yeah, thanks so much, you guys. I appreciate that. But there's also other fields where everybody should be responsible and give a little back. And I was always involved with the federations, trying to make our sport bigger or better. I would be in meetings as a rider representative early on, or I would support organizations like IMBA, who are kind of really responsible for all of our trail building and etiquette and trail advocacy and all that stuff. And I'm like involved with the Mountain Biking Hall of Fame, trying to preserve the history of our sport. And I think the same needs to happen with the trials. We need to also preserve not only the history, but also the future, and people need to be involved. And if we don't do it ourselves, nobody will do it for us trials riders. So we need to organize our own competitions, federations, and you make your own bed. If you wait for the federation to make trials cool, it's never going to happen.
Everything in trials is made by trials riders. It's like riders make things for riders. It's just like this vicious kind of circle.
So I think that invitation extends. it extends out to all of our listeners. Anyone who's listening to this podcast, if you've got anyone has this kind of skill and ability, especially that we're in, 21st century now with the internet, we've learned in this conversation how videos were so hard to make, but now anyone can go out there and do it. So whatever you want to bring to trials, please do.
Yeah, anything specific. That's why I felt like it was my duty. I'm the only person in the trials world that had this. I sort of do this as a job. Like, I'll work with audio and video, and so it was like it was in our right. So anyone else who feels, I can build things, build another trials park in the north of England then, or something.
No, do it yourself. Right on. Yeah, shout out for this. And like us trials riders, we often feel like the unwanted stepchild. And
that's a really good analogy. Yeah.
And as frustrating as that is at times, but it has actually its benefits, and it's also beautiful, and we can make and create our own sport. And that's what we see right now. Like all these guys like you and so many other guys, Kenny and Hamas and Danny Gomez and whoever is involved in whatever level, they all add their flavor, and we create and form our future, and so yes, it's nice to get recognition from outside, but sometimes that recognition can also be, or that outside influence can be damaging, so anyway.
Well, we've got a last final section. We won't keep you too much longer, Hans, but there is a few questions that we ask all of our guests here, so we can't not go through it and ask
the old quick fire round.
The not so, we call it the quick fire round, but it's never quick. So
we'll start off. When you're on your bike, what is your favorite move, that you just love doing? I mean, it could be on any one of your bikes, but trials,
satisfying trick. Yeah.
I don't know any more tricks. No, it's I have to say that lately it's been on the e-bike, riding up technical terrain, stuff that I could never climb before. I mean, I could maybe hop up it, but that's no fun. But on the e-bike, you pedal up stuff that you didn't think were possible. So that's lately been something that really stokes me out.
Still bringing something absolutely new that no one said yet.
Yeah,
I don't always hands ahead of the curve. And everyone's been talking about moves, and he's already said, my favorite is with an e-bike. So I'm so glad you said that. Yeah, no, that was a good one. And what would be one of your favorite locations to ride if you could ride?
This is going to be a really hard one because you have the world,
Yeah. Hang on, I've been to all the countries. So okay, actually, Hans, I'm going to make this a little bit easier for you, for our diehard. If you could ride anywhere in the UK, where would it be? So it's got to be in the UK. Trying to remember places now,
Yeah, I don't know, for trials, I always like that location where Martin Ashton rode with those
Porthcrawl
octagon shaped stone pillars on the beach. Where is that place? Was that in the north of Ireland? I mean, maybe that's in Northern Ireland.
Now I'm going to have to ask Martin because I can't think which one it might be.
And then there is, the Cliffs of Moher is one of my favorite spots that I've ever ridden in terms of taking a photo in Ireland. Those cliffs, those 600-foot cliffs.
Okay.
On the edge.
Cliffs of Moher, that's a new one, yeah.
That was a really cool spot. And then...
I think whilst we've got you as well, because you've been around the world with all your bikes and across your amazing career we've unpacked with this, where in the world kind of ticks a lot of boxes for you? Like if you was to go take your bike, if you was to go on a plane and think, right, I'm going to go ride there.
That's a good one, yeah.
Yeah, I always loved the Alps. I spent a lot of time in a town called Livigno in the Italian Alps that grew into such a mountain biking mecca, and it's such a beautiful place with the Italian lifestyle and all that. And so that's always a fun place. And it's, it's really a good time to be a mountain biker because we have all these purpose-built trails popping up all over the world. Yeah. And there's so many places now, places you would have never thought of. And that started in the UK with the guy, David Davies, who started building those trail centers in Wales back in the early 90s.
Yes.
He was the first guy to build purpose-built trails. And now every place in the world, and there's places you would have never considered to go on a holiday, but they build trails there that's like Disneyland. So that
yeah, that is our
so,
Disneyland. Yeah.
so there's a lot of places nowadays where you can go and should go, and for me though, the Mount Everest for mountain biking is Mount Kilimanjaro, where it's the highest mountain in Africa, and I did a trip there 5 years ago, and we
Back
climbed
to
it.
back as well. Both you did both
Yeah, we
mountains
did.
back to back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That was Mount Kenya too, the second highest, and Danny was on that trip, and that was the hardest trip. And the reason I say it's the Mount Everest for me because it's a mountain that makes sense for mountain bikes. I mean, on the way up, it's 20,000 feet, so you still have to push your bike or carry it. But on the way down, of it. I know there's people who've taken their bike higher than 20,000 feet, but often just for the sake of record, they carry it up a steep mountain and they carry it back down. And
can you just repeat? Sorry,
anyway, I guess
we lost out again there. On you mentioned on the way up is a lot of pushing on the way up, but on the way down, what was the experience of that like? What was?
Yeah, well, Mount Kilimanjaro, we could actually ride 99% of the mountain, and it's actually rideable. It makes sense. Wow. There's other mountains higher than Kilimanjaro where people have taken their mountain bike.
Yep.
But those mountains, they often do it just for the record. They carry it up to 25,000 feet, and then they carry it down again, and they never ride the bike.
Yes.
And so that's not really. But Kilimanjaro is actually a mountain that you can ride all the way down if you're a good enough rider. So
wow,
bear that in mind. Shindig,
trip to Kilimanjaro.
Kilimanjaro, and finally, you're on this amazing trip, doing your favorite moves and your favorite places. Who are the riders that you'd like to be with on that day? This is another.
Who gets you pumped?
Who gets you sort of motivated? Who's getting you going on that day?
Well, it's always the guys who are a lot of fun with and who are into the project. And I have to say, the Brits are pretty high on that list. I've done a lot of trips with Steve Pete.
Yeah.
And I've done, and with Danny, I've done quite a few projects and trips over the years. And he's so into riding and he loves it. And he loves the e-bike right now. It's the best thing for him since sliced bread. He really loves it. And it's fun to ride with him, that enthusiasm and people who are into it. And sometimes on these trips, we have a certain mission, or you need the guys who are on the same page with you when it comes to hardship or adventure or unplanned stuff. And I always try to make my adventures kind of the real thing, as much as we film them and they are getting filmed and some stuff, but we're doing it actually. We're not just posing, and that's so many, sometimes people just go somewhere to look like an adventure, but it's not really, because they always have the support vehicle standing there and they're sleeping in the hotel room at night. And so we're trying to do the real thing. And yeah, Danny and Petey are two of my favorite adventurers.
Awesome. Oh, good shout. Yeah, that's a strong crew there, Hans. Strong crew. And our final, most important question, because it's
related to the Shindig podcast.
It is called the Shindig podcast, and you can get Shindigs very easily on any bicycle, really, not just a trials bike.
But what has got to be your worst?
Do you remember? Yeah, do you remember your worst?
Do you still
Shindig?
get them? Have you got to the point where you've just completed it?
Yeah.
Yeah, I never liked riding with shin guards. They feel too restrictive.
Yes. Can we just? Yeah, thank you. That's one thing there. Yeah. Thanks.
They feel too I did it for a little while. There was like maybe a half a year or so back in the 80s or so, but they would restrict my calves from expanding. I felt like, and they, especially as a trials guy, one calf is much bigger than the other usually because.
Yes.
And knock on wood, me saying that now, because I haven't had a skin dig in a little while, a bad one. But the one I remember the most is we had this competition in Michigan, and it was a big American Norbar race. And I did the trials event, but at the same time, 2 kilometers away was also the dual slalom qualifier. And in the middle of the trials event, I had to sit in the car and drive over to the dual slalom, come back and finish the trials competition. And one section went up literally in a tree, and you had to go back wheel on the branch and go down. And I missed that, and I fell out of the tree, and I had a really bad gash on my shin.
Yeah.
But I also hurt my arm a lot. Then I was banged up, and I finished the competition. And literally the next day on a Monday, I had to fly to New York for a really big TV game show where I was like on a morning show, Regis and Cassie Lee. And I was in that show. I did the whole competition and the whole show on mainstream, big time TV in America.
Yeah.
I flew back home. I called up my doctor and said, you know what? My shin hurts really badly, and I think I need to come in and take an X-ray. He said, come on in. And then at the end of the day, my shin was okay, but I walked out with a cast on my hand. I had a broken hand too ever since that crash, and did all that.
So you phoned up about your shin, but they were like, mate, your shin's fine. You've broken your hand.
Yeah.
That is hilarious. I thought this was going to be our first broken bone shindig then, but oh, that is an.
That shows you how gnarly
story.
and painful a good shindig can be.
But the fact is, like, the show must go on. You were like, nah, I've got to fly, I've got to ride. You've literally no choice in that manner.
Yeah.
You couldn't allow it. Couple of final last things. That was, of course, we asked everyone else. If you could have anyone on the podcast, Hans, who would you like? Who would you like to hear on the podcast?
Okay. Did you hear me? I would say Odd P.
Yes. Brilliant.
He's such a legend and an old friend. And you know what? I don't know if he has a midlife crisis or what, but he has a huge comeback right now because he never did social media. And if you look at the quality of his writing, it's insane.
Yeah,
it's insane.
He's doing another plug for Op P, as you just said. He was recently in Britain's Got the Spanish version of Spain's Got Talent.
Yeah. It was in like some gnarly clip I see where he was trying to like side hop onto like a bike rack, like in his garage, like that would hold a bike up.
Yeah, he's trying to do some things that definitely haven't been done 100%. And he's bringing that element. Very surprised to use that 20-inch trials on the show because that's quite difficult to kind of relate to. But now you watch him on what looks like a single-speed courier bike.
He's still going for it.
He's still going for it. So amazing shout.
He rides all kind of bikes. Anyway, check him out. I think it's Odd P Plays is his handle.
Odd P Play. Yeah, we'll put a tag in there, and definitely now that you've said it, I'll basically say, hey, Hans told us to get in touch with you. It makes it easier. It's the same when Martin Ashton came on. He was like, yeah, Hans will come on. What are you on about? Of course he will. Yeah. So.
And then I suppose the other one is just a final message for all the riders, all the listeners. What do you want to share with the world, Hans?
Yeah, I don't know. Keep on pushing our sport. You know, I like what I see. Keep on riding. Just have fun with it. That's really what matters. If you can make a career, that's secondary. And you know, like take it to the next level. Show the next generation. You know. Show them the way and live your dreams.
That's great.
Awesome.
One important thing we forgot to mention to Hans. How long are you in England right now? Are you going to be here next weekend?
Yeah.
Because there is the largest trials.
No, I'm not.
No. We might have missed you then. Well, I'll let you know.
I'm leaving on Sunday.
Friday to Sunday.
It's Friday to Sunday. It's the biggest trials event in the UK is on Friday. It's called Radical Bikes. It is sold out, but I've secured for you, spoken to the owners that run it. If you wanted to come, you would be able to make an appearance, Hans.
Where is it?
It's in Essex.
It's in Essex, in Chelmsford, at a venue called Radical Bikes. If you're in Leicester,
I know those guys. I know those guys.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, we won't. We're on air right now. We won't hold you to it. We're just letting you know. We'll get in touch. But there is the festival's going to be there. We'll have a stand. We'll have some presents, and it's the first time in 10 years of the sport that it's fully sold out. It's fully sold out.
Send me the info. I will. I'm gonna be in England for 9 weeks, but I'm leaving next Sunday for 10 days to go to Italy, and then I'm back here. So
brilliant.
So
we'll
maybe,
try. And, we'll get.
Let me know what the schedule is on Friday.
Yep.
And
awesome.
We'd love to. Yeah, we will do, Hans. I'll get in touch, and you can let us know, and we'll see. Again, the event will have likely been
gone by the time
this comes out. Anyway, so don't panic if you didn't. We know that.
Don't turn up
busy.
this Friday because Radical Bikes isn't on, and Hans will be in Italy.
So don't worry about that.
But
but keep me posted of cool gatherings in the UK. You know, some of those London street sessions. If I'm around, I like to join them sometimes or watch them. So.
Awesome.
We'd love to, Hans. We'll definitely be letting you know of all of the new exciting things happening.
But thank you once again for coming on.
Thank you so
It's
much,
been
man.
such an awesome insight into your career, and I think the thing that sort of stands out for me is that you've always been making waves. Like in terms of like, there's one wave that comes along that then inspires a generation of trials rider that gets us into it. Even then, talking about how you've shared and been riding with Danny and then keep creating even more waves, and it's just so nice to see that continues even to like now and what you're doing now, and fingers crossed moving it forward with the e-bike movement as well. I think there's people are really going to enjoy this episode,
as well as influencing just riders like myself, people who also do shows and there are people who are professionals who now you still inspire. A couple of my friends do it for a living, and I know they're going to love this podcast, just hearing that. Like, do you know what? There is hope for because sometimes it's scary, especially with the pandemic. So I think you've done a fantastic job with your career, mate, and inspiration, and still doing that, mate. So thank you again. I don't think there are words for us to thank you from the trials community. Just keep doing your thing.
Yeah.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Keep
Thank
it
you
up
very
and
much.
protect those shins.
Yes. Thanks, Hans. We'll take care and have a great weekend. We'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye,
Bye.
everybody.
Bye. Bye.
Ah, you